It all kicked off, as these things often do, with chaos and a very large bill. Recently, Los Angeles found itself at the center of intense anti-ICE riots, leading to a situation that rapidly escalated beyond local control. In response, President Trump, in a move that surprised approximately no one familiar with his political playbook, authorized the deployment of federal troops to the city. The stated goal was simple: to quell the unrest and restore order to the streets of LA. However, the decision itself was anything but simple, immediately igniting a political firestorm that pitted the state's Democratic leadership directly against the White House in a very public and very loud confrontation. The price tag for this federal intervention quickly became a major point of contention. The total cost for sending in the troops was calculated to be a staggering $134 million. Now that is a lot of money. It's the kind of money that makes you check your wallet, even if it isn't your wallet. California Governor Gavin Newsom was quick to condemn the expenditure, calling it a shameful use of taxpayer dollars. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass echoed this sentiment, labeling the entire operation as despicable. Their argument was that this was a costly, heavy-handed federal overreach that did more to provoke than to pacify the situation on the ground. This deployment wasn't just about the money, it was about authority and jurisdiction. The legalities of the federal action were immediately challenged, leading to a courtroom battle. A federal judge initially sided with California, issuing a temporary restraining order on June 12, 2025, to return control of the National Guard to the state, ruling the deployment illegal. However, this legal victory was short-lived. The Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals quickly stepped in, temporarily blocking the judge's order and scheduling a hearing. This legal back and forth only added another layer of complexity and tension to an already volatile situation, leaving everyone wondering who was actually in charge. The critics of Newsom and Bass, however, painted a very different picture of the events. Assistant DHS Secretary Tricia McLaughlin pointed out that the governor and mayor were conveniently ignoring the immense costs of the riots themselves. She highlighted the high price of mass looting, rioters destroying LA's family businesses, public property, and setting cars and other property on fire. With damages already estimated to be in the millions, supporters of the federal action argued that the $134 million was a necessary expense to prevent even greater financial and social devastation. It was, in their view, a crucial investment in public safety, not a political stunt. As soon as Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass criticized the $134 million federal expense, their own state's spending habits were thrown under a microscope. Critics, led by figures like White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy Stephen Miller, wasted no time in drawing a stark comparison. They pointed to a recent cost analysis from the Federation for American Immigration Reform, which is, to be fair, a group with a very clear agenda on this topic. Their report claimed that the total annual cost of providing services to illegal immigrants in California amounts to a jaw-dropping $31 billion. Yes, that's billion with a B, a number that makes the federal deployment cost look like pocket change. This $31 billion figure is, of course, debated, but it represents a powerful talking point for those who believe California's priorities are misplaced. The number encompasses a wide range of services, including education, healthcare, and law enforcement. For instance, a 2019 FAIR study specifically calculated that the costs associated with the incarceration and court proceedings for illegal immigrants in the state exceeded $2 billion per year. These figures are used to argue that while California's leaders are publicly outraged by a one-time federal expense, they are simultaneously overseeing a massive, ongoing financial commitment that, critics argue, places a significant burden on state taxpayers. A major driver of these costs, and a central focus of the debate, is California's healthcare policy. In 2024, the state took the groundbreaking step of expanding its Medi-Cal program. This expansion made all low-income adults, specifically those aged 26 to 49, eligible for state-funded health insurance, regardless of their immigration status. This was the final step in a multi-year effort to provide universal healthcare access. As a result of this policy, approximately 1.6 million illegal immigrants are now enrolled in the state's healthcare system, a significant expansion of the social safety net that comes with an equally significant cost. The financial strain of this healthcare expansion became evident earlier in 2025. Governor Newsom found himself in the position of having to request a $2.8 billion loan from the state legislature. The purpose of the loan was to address a growing deficit in the state's Medicaid program. Officials largely attributed this shortfall to the higher-than-expected costs of covering the newly eligible undocumented population. For critics, this was a clear I-told-you-so moment, providing concrete evidence that the state's progressive policies were financially unsustainable and directly impacting the state's budget and, by extension, its taxpayers. Faced with a barrage of criticism over state spending, California's leadership mounted a robust defense. They argued that viewing these expenditures solely as costs is fundamentally misguided. Izzy Garden, Governor Newsom's communications director, framed the spending not as a drain, but as a long-term investment in the state's future. He stated that there is an irrefutable return on investment when Californians have access to education and healthcare. This perspective reframes the debate entirely. It suggests that a healthier, better-educated populace, regardless of immigration status, ultimately leads to a more productive workforce, a stronger economy, and reduced long-term social costs like emergency room visits. Mayor Karen Bass of Los Angeles amplified this economic argument, focusing on the vital role immigrants play in the state's economy. "We have entire industries that wouldn't even be able to function without immigrant labor," she asserted. This is a practical, on-the-ground reality in California, where sectors like agriculture, hospitality, and construction are heavily reliant on an immigrant workforce. From this viewpoint, providing services like healthcare isn't just a matter of compassion, it's a strategic necessity to support the very foundation of the state's economic engine. Denying these essential services would not only be a humanitarian issue but could also cripple key industries. The defense from Newsom's office also sharply contrasted the state's purposeful spending with what they characterized as a purely political move by the Trump administration. Garden dismissed the federal troop deployment as nothing more than a $140 million political stunt designed to rally a political base. He argued that California's spending on healthcare and education is a deliberate policy choice aimed at improving the lives of its residents and strengthening the state. In contrast, he portrayed the federal action as a reactive, divisive, and wasteful use of taxpayer money that offered no real lasting solution to any underlying problems, serving only to inflame tensions. This defense essentially asks a fundamental question: what is the purpose of government spending? Is it merely to balance a ledger, or is it to build a better society? Supporters of California's approach believe in the latter. They contend that investing in people, including immigrants, pays dividends down the line through increased tax revenue, reduced strain on emergency services, and a more dynamic and resilient economy. This forward-looking perspective stands in stark opposition to the more punitive, cost-centric view of their critics, creating a deep ideological divide over the very role and responsibility of government. At the heart of this entire explosive debate lies a simple, universal truth. People care deeply about how their tax money is spent. Every dollar collected by the government represents the hard work of its citizens, and those citizens rightfully expect that money to be used wisely, efficiently, and in a way that reflects their values and priorities. When a taxpayer in California sees a headline about $134 million being spent on troops, or $31 billion on immigrant services, it's not just an abstract number. It's their money, and they want to know if they are getting good value for it, which is a perfectly reasonable expectation. This concern is amplified in a state like California, where the tax burden is already high and questions about government efficiency are common. A recent study by WalletHub, for instance, delivered a rather unflattering verdict on the Golden State. It ranked California 47th out of the 50 states for taxpayer efficiency. This study compared the amount of state and local taxes collected against the quality of the services provided to citizens. A low ranking like that feeds a narrative that the government is not a good steward of public funds, making residents more sensitive to large spending projects, regardless of their stated purpose or political justification. The clash between Newsom and Trump perfectly illustrates the two competing philosophies on government spending that define modern American politics. One side views spending as an investment in human capital, believing that funding social programs like healthcare for all creates a stronger, more equitable, and ultimately more prosperous society in the long run. The other side prioritizes fiscal restraint and border security, arguing that the government's primary duty is to its legal citizens and that spending on undocumented populations drains resources that could be used to lower taxes or improve services for taxpayers. Ultimately, these debates are about more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. They are about the vision for a community's future. They force a public conversation about what a society values most. Is the priority compassion and inclusion, or is it fiscal responsibility and strict adherence to the rule of law? The controversy in California shows that there are no easy answers, and both sides can present compelling arguments. This is why the allocation of taxpayer money will always be one of the most contentious and important issues in any democracy, shaping not just budgets but the very character of a state and a nation.